Hello, welcome to video 4 in this mini series on how to hand sew. In this video we'll be looking at seams, so we'll be doing back stitch for all of our stitches, and we'll be looking at 3 different seams. We'll be looking at the regular seam and how to finish it so it looks nice, and then we'll be looking at 2 slightly stronger seams that you might want to use for important seams. Okay, so as for our first seam, this will just be a normal seam that you see in most pieces of clothing. So first off, what we want to do is learn where our seam allowance is going to be. So a good way to do that without using chalk to mark it is just to put the 2 seams together and then fold it where we want the seam to be, and then press it with our fingers like that. If you own an iron, then you can get an iron and just hold the iron on top of it, and that will press it using an iron, which will give you a much better fold. With some fabrics it will scorch the fabric or burn it, so you might want to put a piece of cloth over it and then do this. So that will give us our seam allowance. So on that fold is where I'm going to sew. Okay, so the important thing to determine when we start is which side is the good side and which is the bad side of our fabric. So for this regular seam, we want the good sides to be facing in towards each other. Okay, so these lines are chalked on from an earlier project, so I'm going to say that's my good side. So I'm going to put the 2 bad sides of the fabric together to sew this seam. Okay, I've pinned that side, so all I need to do is hold where my fingers are and it will all be held in place. So what I'm going to do is make sure I sew on the line, and I'm going to do a back stitch along that folded line, which is our seam allowance, and that will give us the stitch for that seam. So I'll complete this back stitch, and then once I've finished it, I'll show you how we're going to finish the seam so it's nice and neat. Okay, so here we have our finished seam. So all I've done is back stitched along where we folded it. So what this will look like from the inside is quite messy. So now it's up to us if we want to leave the seam like this or if we want to finish it off and make it look neat. From the other side, what the seam looks like is this. So that's fine for the outside, the good side of the piece of clothing. So what you want to do now is you want to fold the seams that you've made over to one side and then press it with your thumb against a hard surface. So this is hand pressing, and it's not as effective as pressing with an iron. Fold it over both ways as well and press it when it's folded over both sides. It's not as effective as pressing with an iron, so if you do have an iron, then just hold it on there. Make sure you don't scorch the fabric, but hold it on there, and that will give you a better looking seam than if you don't press it. Okay, so as far as making this look neat, what we're going to do now, this can be quite tricky, is fold it over like this, and then press the seam, press the fold, and then we're going to do the same with the other one. It's quite tricky when I'm leaning over a camera. So once that's folded in half, both folded to the inside, what we're going to do now is take these folded bits and we're going to back stitch along the top here. So I'll just try and focus on that. So we're going to backstitch here, okay, and that will hold these two together and they'll be nice and good looking then. So that's what I'll do next. Okay, so I've now sewn the top of that. So those two, like the things that were inside the seam, they've been sewn together now and they're nice and neat. So what this will look like with a finished piece of clothing is that would be the outside, but then the inside will look like that. So it'll look a lot nicer and feel a lot nicer than if we had left it unfinished. Join me in the next video where we'll be looking at the second of the 3 seams.